First up is Skirit, sometimes called sweet white root. This is a self-propagating underground savings account. Once you plant it, it will keep producing for years. It was especially popular in Northern Europe, where it could withstand the harshest of winters and was considered a comfort of the poor. Skirit also did well in areas that were too wet or acidic for potatoes. So when the potato blight came to Europe in the mid-1800s, killing off millions of spuds, Skirit was ready to fill in the gap. But the potato came back with a vengeance. It grew faster, got bigger, and was easier to harvest than scratch. So once again, scratch took a back seat. In recent years, there's been a lot of interest in growing scratch from seed, but if you really want to grow scratch, you actually want to grow it from a piece of root. The way we usually grow things from seed is that the seed is the part of the plant that has the highest potential for growth. That's why, even though squash seeds are huge, you still need to start them in a small container. If you planted a carrot seed directly in the ground, it would just kind of sit there. Not so with scurvy. The best part of the plant for propagation is the root, which is where all the energy is stored. Once you get that route started, it can continue to grow for years, getting bigger and producing more energy for those cold winter months. Like I said, it's kind of like a savings account. The flavor of Skirit is often described as a cross between a potato and a turnip, with some people saying it's better. You can roast it, boil it, stew it, bake it into pies. It has a moist, dense texture and a naturally sweet flavor, kind of like a parsnip or a sweet potato. It's not usually eaten raw, and just like a potato, the skin should be scrubbed off before cooking. One thing you don't want to do is leave the cut surface of the root exposed to light. Just put it right back in the ground and it will be fine. But if you expose the cut surface to light, a dangerous chemical reaction will occur and the root will become poisonous. So don't use a metal knife. Use a wooden or plastic knife to cut your Skagit is a perennial, but it does set seed. Those seeds can be collected and grown, but it takes longer for them to produce an edible route. They call the first year of screed greens, kind of like how you get mustard greens or collard greens. These greens can be eaten raw or cooked, and they have a very nice flavor, somewhat reminiscent of spinach. Now, unlike a lot of perennials, scurvy doesn't require any special treatment after the first year to make it produce. It's already got that underground savings account. It's ready to go. No, two. We're going to look at Alexander. There's a few different plants that go by this common name, but today we're looking at the tall perennial that grows up to 6 feet. With its clusters of yellow flowers, it's pretty easy to identify. Alexander grows wild in Europe along cliffs and roadsides, but it's also found in many other parts of the world. In fact, there's a good chance you've seen it growing somewhere. The entire plant is edible, including the shoots, the leaves, the flowers, and the seeds. The shoots taste like celery. The leaves have a parsley-celery hybrid flavor. The flowers can be used in salads, and the seeds can be dried and used as a pepper substitute. What's extra interesting about these flowers is that they attract lacewings and parasitic wasps, all of which prey on other insects that might be pests in your garden. So if you plant Alexander along the edges of your yard, it may help deter pests from getting into your vegetable garden. The most common method of harvesting wild Alexander is to simply dig up the whole plant and eat the shoots raw. This is possible, but I personally prefer to just cut the shoots like you would with asparagus. This way, you get multiple harvests over the course of a season. Alexander grows well in zones 4 through 9, but it can take a couple of years to establish. After that, it's very low maintenance. Like many wild plants, Alexander was eventually supplanted by its domesticated cousin, celery. Celery starts producing much faster and gets much larger stalks than wild Alexander. By the 1700s, it had mostly disappeared from cultivation, and today, it's rarely eaten, which is a shame because it has got so many different parts that can be eaten, and it has a great flavor. Our No. 3 plant is what's known as a 3-in-1 gadget green. We've looked at 2 similar plants in previous videos, stinging nettles and ground elder. This one is neither of those. It is good King Henry or like stinging nettles and ground elder. All parts of good King Henry are edible and quite nutritious. The shoots are delicious, dipped in oil or vinegar. They taste like asparagus. The leaves taste like spinach, and the buds can be blanched or steamed, and they taste like broccoli. It's an extremely reliable plant that reseeds itself every year. It's very easy to grow, and it's extremely hardy. It is perfect for Zone 3. It grows throughout Europe and Asia, and it has also naturalized in North America. It's been used as a preserve, meaning something you can use to thicken soups and stews. When you cook it down, it becomes a jelly-like substance that adds thickness to thin soups or stews. Good King Henry is extremely rich in iron and vitamin C. The leaves can also be used medicinally to treat wounds. The root tea is a mild laxative. It can be used to treat constipation or to induce labor. Despite all these wonderful qualities, good King Henry fell out of favor when commercial monocultures of vegetables became widespread. You can sell spinach or broccoli by the pound. If there is some other random plant in there competing for nutrients, For the same reason, good King Henry fell out of favor with farmers and it just disappeared. There is a good chance you'll see good King Henry growing in your yard or in the cracks of your sidewalk. It loves growing in disturbed soil, and if you try to pull it out, it's going to fight you tooth and nail because of its extensive root system. It's not invasive, but it can be a real pain to get rid of. That's why you really only want to plant it in an area where you regularly harvest it. If you let it get too big, it can crowd out other plants. But if you harvest it regularly, it will produce a lot of food for you, and it will stay small. So there you have it, 3 more wild food plants that you might want to add to your diet. Have you ever tried any of these? Let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't, let us know which one you want to try first. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. For ancient vegetables that are long lost to history, Salsify, also known as oyster plant, or the violet or white of the earth, is a type of vegetable that has been around since Roman times. It was highly valued for its unique flavor and texture, and was often used as a fish substitute during Lent. In fact, there is a record from 1392 showing that it was so popular as a fake fish during Lent that London officials actually tried to ban it, because they said it was, quote, a great deceit to the people. But this doesn't seem to have worked all that well. We can find recipes for salsify in medieval cookbooks like the Film of Curry, which includes a recipe for a delicious salsify tart. This book was published in 1398, only 6 years after the failed ban, and it features a recipe for making a pie with salsify and other ingredients like figs, saffron, and ginger. So clearly, people were still eating it, and it remained popular throughout Europe until at least the 16th century. And how did it taste? Well, according to those who have tried it, it has an oyster-like flavor and a soft, creamy texture. The root vegetable has long, thin white or black roots that grow up to 3 feet in length. When cooked, these roots become softer and take on the taste of oysters. So if you've never tried an oyster before, maybe give salsify a go. If you don't like it though, don't worry. You're not alone. Apparently it went out of style because it grew too slowly and looked unattractive. So it just got abandoned. It grows so slowly, in fact, that it takes 2 full years for the roots to be large enough to harvest. Maybe that's why even though salsify once had a dedicated following, over time, it got replaced with faster growing crops and is now rarely seen outside of botanical gardens. Luckily for us though, there are some varieties that store really well and don't spoil over the winter. So if you have a good harvest, you can eat them all year round. Medlar. Next up, we have a fruit called medlar, which is also known as German medlar, or the little thief. According to historical records, medlar was one of the last fresh fruits of autumn, but it couldn't be eaten as soon as it was picked. Instead, it needed a process called bleaching, which involved leaving it somewhere warm and airy, so it could gradually ripen over time. Bleaching needed to happen over several weeks in the fall, and then the fruit would be stored somewhere cool and dark until it was ready to eat in the winter. Nowadays, however, consumers want to eat fresh fruit right away, so this kind of preparation isn't popular anymore. And as a result, medlar trees are very rare. But what does medlar taste like? Well, luckily for us, we have writings from the past to give us an idea. The German naturalist and writer, Albertus Magnus, described it as having flesh that transforms from bitter to sweet during the bleaching process, eventually developing a cinnamon-like flavor reminiscent of apple. Medlars can be made into tarts, jellies, and wines, and it seems like they were enjoyed by many throughout Europe and Asia until about the 18th century. One of the reasons for their decline may be that they were overshadowed by other fruits that could be eaten immediately, such as apples. Apples were easier to grow and didn't require the same kind of special treatment that medlars did. As a result, apples became more popular and eventually took over. Chickweed. Not all lost foods come from plants that were highly prized. Some were considered weeds and were only used because nothing else was available. This was the case for chickweed, a low-growing annual plant that has small, delicate, white flowers. Chickweed is a common weed found in gardens all over the world, and it grows best in shady areas, where it can form dense mats of foliage. These little plants grow very quickly which means they are often viewed as a nuisance rather than a valuable food source. For this reason, it was labeled a nuisance and eradicated by gardeners who preferred to grow other crops instead. Today, it is usually dismissed as a weed and sprayed with herbicide. But believe it or not, chickweed is actually packed full of nutrients and was commonly eaten throughout Europe and Asia in the past. According to historical records, it contains approximately 7 times the vitamin C found in oranges and was believed to have medicinal properties. The young leaves and stems were eaten fresh in salads, while the flowers were often used to make puddings and soups. They were also dried and ground into a powder that could be used as a spice or mixed with flour to make bread and other baked goods. Chickweed was considered a nutritious and wholesome food, especially for poor people who didn't have access to other fresh produce. They were also used medicinally as poultices for cuts and other skin problems, as well as teas to help with fevers and inflammation. As beneficial as it was, though it was ultimately replaced by other, more appealing crops and is now mostly forgotten. Scorzonera is a type of black-skinned root vegetable that grows underground. It has a white, juicy flesh that is somewhat similar to salad. While it may look a bit strange to us today, it was once a popular ingredient in medieval European cuisine. In fact, it was mentioned in several old books on cooking and gardening, including one by the English author John Parkinson, who wrote in 1629 that scorzonera has a flavor that is, quote, milder, sweeter than salad. He also said that it has hints of asparagus and nuts, and suggested that it could be used in place of artichokes. The good news is that it stores really well. The method for storing it was to bury it in sand, and it could last all the way until summer. But unfortunately, this didn't save it from disappearing over time. One reason for its decline could be that it was outcompeted by other root vegetables that were easier to harvest and had a more appealing appearance. Another factor contributing to its decline was the emergence of refrigeration, which made it possible to store fresh produce for longer periods of time. With refrigeration, there was no need to rely on storable root vegetables like squash. Finally, the rise of fast-growing crops also contributed to its disappearance. Modern farming practices prioritize fast-growing, high-yielding crops. Scorzonera was not only slow-growing, but also had an unattractive appearance, which made it less appealing to farmers. But do you think any of these forgotten foods deserve a second chance? Let me know in the comments below. Also, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video and found it useful or interesting. Subscribe if you want to learn more about the history of food and other cool stuff. And as always, thanks for watching. Onions, garlic, and shallots have a reputation for being high maintenance. They need a long growing season, good drainage, and plenty of nutrients. Well, what if I told you there were alternatives to these alliums that could be easier to grow and had unique flavors to boot? Today we're talking about 5 underappreciated plants that your grandparents probably grew but are relatively unknown today. Let's start off with a real green onion, because this one doesn't make any bulbs at all. Welsh onion, or Chinese onion, allium, is a perennial native to East Asia. It was brought to Europe during the Middle Ages where it became naturalized. It grows in USDA zones 4 to 9. This onion produces hollow cylindrical shoots, which can reach up to 2 feet in height, and its roots form a tight clump. Unlike other allium species, this plant does not produce a bulb. The long, slender leaves are hollow and have a mild green onion flavor. Its flavor is sometimes described as sweeter and less pungent than that of brown onion. It can be used raw in soups and salads, and the greens stay palatable through the winter, especially when grown near Jerusalem artichokes. A mature plant will send out a flowering stalk in the second year, which can also be eaten. Once established, these clumps divide every 3 to 4 years, and each section can be replanted to produce more plants. In fact, one plant can theoretically feed a family for a decade or more. But unfortunately, this onion has fallen out of favor. In recent decades, it may be because large bulb onions were bred specifically for commercial yield and ease of whatever the reason, this easy perennial is worth a try in any garden. A flavorful wild green that's often overlooked is fat hen or goosefoot chenopodium album. You might know it better as a weed. It's a sprawling annual plant with distinctive pale green, triangular-shaped leaves that are deeply lobed and tiny flowers are borne on long branching stems above the foliage, and later develop into small seed capsules. Fat hen contains high levels of protein, iron, and calcium. All parts of the plant are edible. The leaves can be used like spinach and taste like a milder version of lamb's quarters. The seeds can be ground into a fine powder and used as a flour extender in baking. It was used as an agricultural crop in ancient Egypt and was recommended by Roman writers. As a treatment for respiratory ailments, fat hen was known as a valuable food source among American pioneers, and Native Americans used it medicinally. Unfortunately, it was wiped out as an agricultural crop. Because it emerged as an unwanted weed that competed with crops for resources, it fell out of favor, and nowadays it's typically found growing in waste places, along roadsides and in vegetable gardens. The herb Levisticum officinale has a long culinary history dating back to the time of ancient Rome. It's a tall, stately perennial growing up to 7 feet in height and has a strong celery parsley-like flavor. The plant is native to the Mediterranean region and is hardy in zones 5 to 9. Each leaf is made up of multiple leaflets that are arranged in an alternating fashion along the central stem. The small clusters of white or greenish flowers appear in the upper leaf axils and eventually produce tiny brown seeds. Every part of the plant is edible, and it can be used in soups, stir-fries, and breads. The candade stems were a popular medieval delicacy and were sometimes served as an accompaniment to roasted meats. Lovage also has medicinal properties and aids digestion, reduces bloating, and acts as a It was used by monks to treat digestive issues and urinary tract infections. Unfortunately, it declined in popularity after the Middle Ages when imported spices eclipsed its flavor in post-medieval kitchens. Most people think of lettuce or cabbage when they hear the word salad, but centuries ago, corn salad was a common winter green. Valerianella locusta, commonly known as corn salad, is an annual herb that grows in USDA zones 5 to 10. Smooth and succulent with a mildly nutty and slightly bitter flavor, reminiscent of watercress. The leaves are arranged in a basal rosette and the stems are branched and can reach up to 2 feet in height. Corn salad produces tiny white flowers that later develop into small brown seeds. Corn salad gets its name from its historical habit of growing in grain fields and along corn rows. It's been cultivated since ancient times and was highly prized by Roman Emperor Nero, who reportedly had it imported from Egypt. While it was once a common wintergreen in European markets, it's now mostly replaced by longer-lasting lettuces. However, it's still occasionally found in specialty markets and is sometimes sold as a corn salad is high in omega-3 fatty acids, iron and vitamin C, and can be harvested through the winter and mild climates. One of the most interesting and useful plants in this episode is Tanacetum vulgare, also known as common tansy, or Develsbit. It has ferny-looking leaves that grow up to 3 feet in height and produce clusters of small yellow button flowers at the ends of their stems. Tansy is native to Eurasia and is hardy in zones 5 to 9. Despite its somewhat toxic properties, tansy has been widely cultivated for its culinary and medicinal uses throughout history. All parts of the plant are edible, but it should be consumed in moderation due to the potential toxicity of its essential oils. Tansy has a complex, bitter, spicy, sweet flavor that can be difficult to place, but it contains over 40 different flavor compounds, including camphor, germicrene, D and beta. These compounds give it a unique taste that can be either appealing or off. The leaves can be added to puddings, cheeses, and ales. It was often used as a flavoring agent in traditional recipes and was even used to flavor gin. Tansy also has antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties and has been used as a natural preservative. It was also used as a home remedy for various ailments, including colds, fevers, and digestive problems. In medieval times, it was even used as a treatment for parasitic worms. The plant's use as a medicinal herb led to its inclusion in the pharmacopoeia of many cultures, including those of the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. It was also used by Native Americans for similar purposes. However, despite its long history of use, tansy has largely fallen out of favor in modern times. Many people find its flavor to be too aggressively aromatic, and it's rarely used in modern recipes. Some sources even claim that it's poisonous, which adds to its reputation as a potentially harmful plant. However, when used in small amounts, tansy can add a unique flavor to dishes, and it is still used by some chefs and home cooks. Thanks for watching. Do you have a favorite forgotten green that you'd like to see us cover in a future episode? Let us know down in the comments. Sea kale is a coastal perennial which grows abundantly in the British seaside towns where I grew up. Every spring when I was young, I'd see it pushing up through the shingle and sand with its delicate feathery fronds. And I always wondered if it was edible, but no one ever told me, and so I never found out until I left school and began to teach myself about foraging. These days, it is still all around me. But I do not even stop and look at it anymore because it is just so common and I know it so well. Yet it was this very familiarity that made me overlook its potential. It's often been called the asparagus of the sea, which makes sense given that it has a similar delicacy and slightly salty, asparagus-like flavor. So too are the blanched young shoots eaten raw in spring, whereas in late summer, once the plants have flowered and gone to seed, the lower leaves become much tougher and more cabbage-like. They can be blanched and cooked like any other brassica and are actually quite delicious and nutritious. Raw, however, they're really rather bitter and unpleasant. And it is this pleasant surprise that we're going to exploit today as we make some sea kale flavored crisps. But before that, let's take a moment to think about the story of sea kale and why it's declining. Sea kale grows naturally along most temperate coastlines around the world, including in Britain, North America, and New Zealand, where it's considered a weed. In fact, it gets its name from the Greek word kao, meaning beautiful, and the Latin word marinus, meaning of the sea. It's therefore a beautiful child of the sea. Now, while I've seen it growing wild my whole life, these days I can't remember the last time I saw someone harvesting it. That's probably partly because it's so common and easy to harvest, but mostly because few people even realize it's there. One of my favorite things about sea kale is that it is wild, and yet still provides us with an abundant harvest every year. It has an extensive shallow root system which allows it to spread outwards quickly and colonize new areas. Unlike most vegetables, which come from different parts of the plant, we eat the entire plant, which means we can harvest sea kale over and over again throughout the summer months, without needing to pull up the whole plant. Perhaps that's why it's often called the perpetual kale. Sea kale is also incredibly hardy and cold tolerant, allowing it to thrive in exposed coastal areas where temperatures can fluctuate wildly. In the UK, it has been reported that sea kale can survive down to -15 degrees Celsius, and in North America, as low as 30 degrees Fahrenheit. In addition to its hardiness, it is also remarkably drought-resistant, thanks to its deep green succulent leaves, which act like water tanks and allow it to survive long periods without rainfall. The leaves can grow up to 1 meter long and 25 centimeters wide and have a leathery texture. As I mentioned earlier, the blanched young shoots taste like asparagus, crunchy, tender, fresh, and grassy, with a hint of salt. However, as the shoots elongate and start to turn woody, the texture becomes increasingly fibrous and sandy. Once the plant flowers, the leaves become much tougher and can be cooked like any other branch. This particular plant is thought to have originated in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea region and was brought to Britain by the Romans. They valued it not for its nutrition or flavor, but for its medicinal qualities. Dioscorides recommended it for treating kidney stones and gout. It was also noted for its diuretic properties. Meanwhile, the Greeks used it to treat eye disorders and skin conditions. But ultimately, it was the Portuguese who took an interest in sea kale's potential as a vegetable. They were the first to grow it in kitchen gardens and introduced it to the Americas and South Africa. Nowadays, sea kale is seldom eaten despite its interesting flavor and high nutrition. It contains approximately 6 times more vitamin C than lemons and is packed full of antioxidants, carotenoids, and fatty acids. Instead, it is mostly used as an ornamental plant in coastal gardens and parks, or allowed to grow wild along road verges and riverbanks. Ironically, sea kale could have been one of our earliest sources of vitamin C, but we overlooked it. Now woad. Woad is a dye plant with pretty little purple flowers and small leaves which have a mild, peppery flavor. I've got a big patch growing at the bottom of my garden. When I was a kid, I used to eat the young leaves in early spring salads and soups. They have a slightly bitter flavor, reminiscent of mustard cress, with hints of rocket and radish. Sadly, the plant's reputation as a source of blue pigment far outweighs its value as a food. The English word woad comes from the Old French word for the plant, which in turn derives from the Gaelic word gwa, meaning blue. During the 18th century, woad was an important source of blue dye, which was used to color cloth and fabrics. It was even used to dye the uniforms of the British Army. However, the popularity of woad as a dye began to decline in the mid-19th century, due to the introduction of synthetic dye, and nowadays it's mostly relegated to cottage gardens and wild areas. Despite this, woad is still sometimes used as a natural dye for textiles and paper. Unfortunately, though, the stigma associated with dye processing led to food uses being forgotten entirely. In the past, woad was believed to cause cancer, although recent studies have shown that it has anti-cancer properties. Some believe that this confusion arose because woad was often grown alongside opium poppies, which are highly addictive and have a long history of being overused. Others believe that the theory was deliberately started by landowners, who wanted to keep their land free of a potentially dangerous weed. Whatever the truth, the stigma remains, and woad continues to be overlooked as a nutritious and tasty green. Now finally, turnip greens. Turnip greens are the leafy tops of turnips, which many people throw away after harvesting the bulbous root, although the roots are certainly the most popular part of the plant. The greens are perfectly edible and in fact are 4 times richer in calcium, 3 times richer in vitamin A, and twice as rich in protein per kilogram than the root. The greens can be harvested repeatedly without harming the roots below. Unlike cabbage, where chopping the leaves damages the plant and reduces the yield of vegetables, turnips were first domesticated in what is now Central Greece around 2000 BC and subsequently spread across Europe and Western Asia. It's believed that they were brought to Britain by the Romans, although archaeological evidence suggests that they may have been present before then. Turnip greens are a common sight in many gardens, often treated as a weed. However, many people are unaware that they are not only edible, but also highly nutritious. In the past, turnip greens were used as a treatment for various ailments, such as coughs, colds, and digestive problems. They were also used as a dye to color fabric and wool. While the greens can be eaten raw, they are best when lightly steamed, boiled, or in a little butter or olive oil. Interestingly, the older leaves are said to have a stronger flavor and higher nutritional content than the younger leaves. Despite their nutritional value, turnip greens are often discarded, which is unfortunate because they could be used to reduce food waste and provide a nutritious addition to many meals. This is partly because they can be difficult to harvest without damaging the roots, and partly because they are often overlooked. The fact that most of our calories come from processed carbohydrates means that our brains don't even register them as food. There's a huge amount of turnip greens in my garden right now, but I'll never eat them here. I'll have to wait until I move house. Turnip greens are a good example of how our modern agricultural practices and consumer habits have led to the decline of certain foods. Our focus on the bulbous roots of plants has caused us to overlook the equally nutritious greens, which are often seen as a nuisance. By reintroducing turnip greens into our diet, we can not only reduce food waste, but also enjoy a nutritious and underappreciated vegetable. That's all for this week. Let me know in the comments below which of these 3 wild foods you'd like to try. If you want to learn more about foraging, I've got loads of information on my website. And remember to check out the links below. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching.